Hello and welcome to the first ever Only a Bag gear review video. In this episode, I want to talk about Tevas, or Tevas if you pronounce it that way. I think they're pronounced Tevas, but I started calling them Tevas and I haven't stopped. These are them, if you have not seen them or heard of them. This is my partner's pair and this is my pair. If you don't know of Teva, they are a US-based company. Even though they no longer make their shoes in America, they're still based there. They're like an old river rafting, like in the, I think 70s is when they started. They sort of created this strap design based off of, according to their story, based off of, tying wristwatches to flip-flops to make sure the shoes did not float away while rafting. And now, of course, this has become a very popular style of strapping something to your foot. They're copied in a lot, like I think H&M and stuff like that has copies of these. But we like, my partner and I, Darcy, when we, if you have seen the podcast or heard the podcast, then you know who she is. But when we buy something new, we do look for responsible companies. We look for the best possible companies that we can try and support. And this means, they're not necessarily all Blue Sign or they're not all Patagonia, unfortunately. But Teva does do a lot to reduce their waste, reduce their water usage. They do a lot to, even the straps are all supposed to be recycled polyester, which is really cool. So ideally, no new plastics are being created. However, they are polyester, so if we want to talk about microplastics and things like that, obviously these are, probably not amazing as far as microplastics go. However, for what we needed, and that was just a really basic sandal, they really fit our purpose as well. Because if you Google best sandal or best, like most rugged sandal, that kind of thing, you're going to get usually 3 different companies. And it's Chacos, Kinks, and Tevas. And the reason we went with Teva is because, one, cheaper. I think these are $50 or $55. Chacos are $120. Kinks are somewhere in between the two. Chacos have a molded footbed. It's a hard molded footbed, so it's not as pliable. These obviously are it's foam with a little rubber at the bottom, very pliable. And the Kinks have a kind of a cage system to sort of keep your foot in, whereas these have a really simple, I'll use this one so you can actually see the straps, a very simple minimalist strap system. So we thought this was the way to go. And the reason I have 2 is because we bought them at slightly different times. Darcy bought hers, I want to say early 2020, late 2019. And I bought mine late 2020. So there's about a year difference between the two. And when I kind of film up close later, I'm going to show you just some slight differences in the age and how we've worn them. And most of it has to do with the fact I'm a heavier person. I'm easily 100 pounds heavier than her. So a lot of the wear and tear comes from 100 extra pounds rubbing into the soles or tearing at, basically it's like my foot gets caught in something and it's me tearing it versus her. There's a lot more force behind it. So I think sometimes the straps tend to get torn a lot easier. So let's take an up close look at some of the build quality questions as well as the where it started to fall apart a little bit. Okay, so let's look kind of close up at 2 main things, the build quality and some of the places where it has started to fall apart. Very quickly, actually, the first thing I want to look at are the soles. This is Darcy's pair and this is my pair. As you can tell, actually, even in the video, hers has less wear than mine does, even though we wear them about the same amount. In the back, maybe I'll do like this, you can kind of tell they're more even. Hers are pretty smooth back here, as are mine. So the heel is still similarly worn, and to sort of show some of these, this is kind of coming unglued, but that's more to do with the fact that it's just been worn away and then it's having trouble staying together. The front, I've glued them back together kind of, It's hard though, well, it's hard to tell what they looked like before, I guess, because I don't necessarily want to pull them back apart. But the sole was coming undone right around here, which made it very difficult to walk because this would catch on the bottom. And then the same thing here. This sole was coming undone. And then even in the back, it just was a little bit sort of, basically being rubbed away. And I apologize, I'm trying to get it to focus. It's a little bit difficult for it to focus sometimes. So that was just the first thing I wanted to mention as far as kind of the build quality. And the other bit is not as important, but you can kind of tell some of this is starting to come apart. So not everywhere, obviously, but just little bits and pieces here and there. The strings are starting to show a little bit, even on Darcy's, which are a little bit older, but again, less sort of worn. You can see some of that bad gluing job right here where the glue sort of got away from me. That is not their job. Theirs was much cleaner when it arrived. And the other couple things I wanted to show were the footbed, or was a footbed. You can kind of tell it has this, not a mesh design, but it's a bit like mesh, I guess you can call it, which is quite grippy, except when my feet start to sweat. If you are somebody with, basically if your feet touch plastic, sometimes they tend to sweat more than when they're like on cork or cotton or wool. So the only time I've noticed these ever getting slippery is when my feet start to sweat, because then my foot is in the footbed, but it's slipping, whereas the sole does not slip at all. So that is something to pay attention to if you do get them, or if you have sweaty feet. They don't actually, though, I will say they are pretty good in the water, seawater, fresh water, whatever it is, whatever water you're in. They have been amazing as far as being very grippy on the bottom. But again, you can kind of tell in the back here, it started to worn away ever so slightly where my heels rub up against it. Actually, one of the issues I was having and then Darcy started having recently is, again, because I wear these, I think I'm just heavier, so I wear through them quicker. But this sort of stuff gets trapped on my heel of my foot. So sometimes in the evenings after wearing them, I'll be like, oh my God, my feet are dirty. And then I realize it's just the foam here. So it's not that they're actually dirty, it's just that there's just basically bits of foam. And that's pretty much it for the build quality. Again, there are little pieces like this here. We're just sort of rubbing against another shoe or rubbing against something that on the ground, just hitting things as I climb. The soles themselves, even though they are starting to wear away, they're really quite sturdy as far as they're very grippy soles. On wet rocks, on wet soil, mud, things like that, I've always been able to keep my balance, which I'm really pleasantly surprised because I use them a lot in the summer for hiking rather than hiking boots, because I don't own hiking boots for the summer. I use sandals. Besides that is the build quality, and then I want to very briefly talk about the pros and cons before ending the video. Before we bought these sandals, we did a lot of research into the pros and the cons of Tevas. We wanted to know why people were buying them, what they were using them for, and specifically when they started falling apart, why they started falling apart. And these, as you've already seen with the build quality, some of that glue does come undone. The straps do start to fray a little bit. And then obviously that sole does get worn away just a little bit. So those are some sort of maybe some negatives, but there are obviously pros to it as well, which is why we bought them. So some of the pros are, like I have mentioned, they're rugged, they have a really good sole, they do take a while to wear down, they are very easy to clean, because they're just foam and rubber. If you have an old toothbrush, some soap, you can scrub out the foam, which is that sort of top sole, or the footbed, I guess. And same thing with the bottom, same thing with the sole. The straps wash really, really, really easily. And of course they dry in a few hours in the sun. So super simple to clean. And then again, the price, $50, I think mine were on sale for like $35, $40. Darcy got hers, I think, for 50 or 55. Some of the cons, as you saw with the build quality, one of the other cons is everybody I know who owns Tevas have found that they do tend to smell more than other shoes. In the sense that, like, I know people who are like, oh, my feet never smell, never. Oh, then like they never sweat. And then in Tevas, they're like, wow, they smell terrible. Partly has to do, I think, with the plastic that's just touching your foot the whole time. But it is something to keep in mind if you are backpacking, if you are traveling around, because one of the benefits of Tevas is they're very lightweight. I mean, they're not, a couple ounces, and they roll up, fold up. You can also strap them to the outside of your bag. So they're great for that. But I've had them in my backpack right there. We'll talk about that in a different video. But they're sort of on the side in the water bottle pouch is where I'll keep them sometimes. And I realized if, I'm coming off of a few-week trip, a month-long trip, and they kind of smell a little bit, people on the train or the bus next to me don't necessarily want to be smelling. If I can smell them, they can definitely smell them. And that can ruin people's trips or their journey on the train or the bus. So it's something to keep in mind that we try to wash them while we use them or switch shoes. I've noticed that if we use the Tevas one day and then flip-flops or shoes or something like that the next day, they don't obviously tend to smell that bad. But when they're constantly used is when they do start to smell worse. But besides that, the glue coming undone, that's a just classic shoe problem. The straps getting worn, again, there's nothing much you can do about that. The fact they smell, yes, it's a little bit annoying, but there's not that many cons to them, especially at the price range of like $50. That's some of the cheapest sandals I found that are from a company trying to still do things in a more environmentally friendly way. So if you're looking for a pair of budget sandals, if you're looking for something just to wear in the summers that will leave you with a really nice square tan line, because your foot will be inside this lovely square design pattern. Well, it's more square when it's on your foot. Then Tevas really are the way to go. They're definitely my recommendation. Not paid, obviously, to say this. I don't even have an affiliate link. I just figured I'll do a gear review on something that I've actually used for the last 2 years rather than like some of the other gear reviews I've seen where they just got these Tevas out of a box and they try them on and they say, yeah, they're great, I love them. So I figured this might help someone who is looking for some actual information, some actual pros and cons. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you back on the next video.